Good afternoon, everyone. In today's video, we're going to spend some time on a member request where the overall idea is to translate our current V-score indicator from a lower time frame study into an upper time frame study. This really has a few key benefits, but I think the main one is that instead of having to think of our support and resistance levels in terms of standard deviations, you can instead start to think about them directly as price, which I think is one less thing for your brain to have to calculate, or in terms of the V-score indicator, a few less clicks. Now, along the way, we're going to make this both a ThinkScript exercise, but I'm also going to try and introduce a new idea, which is really around using some sort of a very basic card counting system here, that same +1, -1, and 0 scale, and introducing that in the upper study to try and create a new set of bullish and bearish signals. We already had our basic ones in the V-score. This is going to be a different take on that, really looking to try and keep testing new ideas. So here's an example of what our current study looks like. This is the lower panel indicator. It's a free download. You will need it for this tutorial in order to follow along. It's a lot easier. And I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. I'll cover what the V-score is in just a second. There's a bit of a recap section where we'll spend a few minutes doing that. But I'd like to spend more time talking about what we're going to translate this into. So right down here below, you have the same support and resistance levels, but here this ranges from a scale of -3 standard deviations all the way up to 3 standard deviations. On the upper time frame chart, you'll notice this is a bit different. Here we see things ranging in terms of price. That same -3 standard deviation is 12.32 in terms of price, and this is a stock chart of United States Steel. Now, moving on to that additional cool thing in terms of card counting, that is what affects these actual bullish and there's also bearish signals. And we'll also build a very easy scan, which is what's allowing us to find that, hey, today we have United States Steel actually triggering this condition. So I think this is going to be a fun tutorial. It'll be fairly easy for those of you that are beginners, you should be able to follow along, especially if you download the code ahead of time. Now, before we move forward to the upper study, let's do a quick recap of what the lower pane study V-score actually represents. Now, the V-score on a high level is calculated by taking the Z-score distance between where price action is currently at and the volume-weighted average price line, which then is useful in helping us understand where our support and resistance levels, and we start to look at that in terms of standard deviation, as you should have gathered on the previous chart. Now, this is a free download. Again, you can download it at tosindicators.com/indicators/vscore. And there we have the lower time frame study, which is what we've already built. That has its own set of bullish and bearish signals. This is using a whole different set of conditions where we really started to do things like understanding cloud trends. The tutorial will be useful here in understanding this, but the key here, different set of signals. We also built out bullish and bearish scans for these same signals. And then finally, we had deviation labels to try and translate that same standard deviation into price. Now in the upper time frame study, you can see you won't have any need for the deviation labels. We're going to be changing this so slightly different, which then means we're going to need to really redo our bullish bearish signals along with our bullish bearish scans for our new experimentation idea. And instead of being a lower study, this will now translate to our upper study. So let's keep moving forward to understand what is going to go on in the upper study here. And what is really different? This is again designed more for visual traders. There's going to be different signals here all around that idea of the card counting to measure trend, really keeping a track of has price action been above or below the VWAP line for an extended period of time for whatever set bars you're looking at. And finally, I think this ends up becoming most useful for identifying VWAP pullbacks where trend again is supporting that. You'll see one other time on this United States Steel chart where using an anchor point of January 1st, 2021, we had that one period, which was a pullback. We're seeing that same pullback opportunity right now, and this is exactly what today's indicator will help us try and identify. Now, to translate the V-score into the upper study in terms of on a more tactical level, we're going to need to tweak all of our standard deviation levels that are currently defined as a def variable to a plot variable. That's what's going to allow it to actually plot as that line that we saw in our charts. We're going to need to add in this additional card counting logic for tracking the trend based off of if we're above or below the volume weighted average price. We're going to then use that same new logic to create bullish and bearish signals, which are going to be different from the original V-score indicator. And finally, it would be nice, which is what we're going to build, to be able to scan and know exactly where is this signal plotting today and how can we find that. You'll notice that that is going to be a very quick, nifty one-line TOS scan, and I think you'll learn really just how easy it is to build your own ThinkOrSwim scans for some of these popular indicators. Now, for those of you that would like to skip the tutorial, both the upper and the lower time frame study are available on our website. Both are free, tosindicators.com/indicators/VScore to download it. Now, in case you need help learning how to import the indicator into ThinkOrSwim, here's also a tutorial that walks through that. It's actually about the VScore in itself, which will give you an idea of how to use the STUDY.ts file, and instead of playing it as a movie, import it directly into ThinkOrSwim. All right, so with that, let's get started with the actual coding piece and dive directly into ThinkScript. Now to get started, you will need the previous indicator as that has the code that we're going to lift. And again, you can download that using this URL, tosindicators.com/indicators/VScore. You come into this page, click the download VScore button, and then you can directly unzip and import this folder into ThinkOrSwim. Now for this tutorial, I'm going to use this code as our baseline just so we can all make sure that we're on the same page. So I'll copy paste all of this, close this out, and come in directly into ThinkOrSwim, and we'll create this as a new study, and we'll start using this as our starting point for really editing this code. So here we can say something like this is the VScore upper study. Can even give this a name, TI VScore upper. Okay, so the first thing we'd like to change is declare this as an upper study. So that way, anytime we add it to our charts, it gets added directly to the upper bound. And now if we scroll down, this is the part where our current VScore is plotting. We no longer will want to see this plot as a plot variable. We are only looking at the actual standard deviations. So we change our VScore to a def variable. And now we have our zero lines, and all of these are currently defined as integer values. So in order to define them as real deviation values, we can use the formula that we had used to calculate the same price that was displayed in our label. And this was that standard deviation to price formula that I mentioned, which we had built as a feature in that lower time frame study. So there I can use the same formula, copy paste this, and here we'll say instead of chosen dev, that's going to be 0 times our deviation plus price. We can paste this one more time. This is going to be 1, this is going to be 2, and this will be 3. Now if we keep coming down here below, this is going to be now -1. So we go the other way, -2, and then -3. We'll get rid of the 0.3 ones that we had. I think these were just there as placeholders, so we can do something like def instead there. Okay, cool. So as of right now, we have all of this plotting, which should give us a line on our charts. We can also remove all of this code, I believe. We are no longer going to be using the cloud stuff as determining the trend. So let's just leave it for the time being, but we'll make some changes here in a second. Let's click OK. Let's click Apply and see what this has done so far. So if we zoom out, the date that we currently have here is still 2018, so let's go ahead and change this to 2021-0101, and we can click OK, and then let's make sure this date is synced up as well, 2021-0101, and cool. Okay, so now what we should see, at least as of right now, is these two should be tracking more or less, where the VScore line represents what we currently see in terms of actual price. We have this cloud, which we'll get rid of in a second here. That's one thing we need to change. Now, we'd also like to have these colors align, but let's see if we hit the VWAP line when it actually shows us. And so currently here, it does look like that, so perfect. Let's come right back in, and let's keep tweaking this some more. Now next, we can get rid of all of the cloud stuff. So I think that's all of these labels and variables right here, all the way from the defining of the cloud 1, 2, to really measuring out each of the different scenarios. That then allows us to get rid of that line. Now we should have an error here around our cloud 1 since none of these variables really exist anymore. So let's go ahead and actually, instead of deleting everything, let's just remove everything that has any mention of cloud for right now. And then we can do the same right here. And then we don't need these alerts as well. Actually, we'll do the same trick in case anyone would like to keep them. I'll remove. Okay, perfect. So as of right now, we have really clean code. So if we click OK, this is now more what we'd like to see. We don't have that same cloud stuff. So next up, let's try and make these colors line up. So let's come right back in. We're no longer using chosen dev as a variable either. So we can remove that. We can also remove, I think, actually we may need that one still. We don't need dev stop. Chosen dev is no longer a variable we care about either. That was part of the add label code. And we're back to having our code compile without errors. Now we are going to still be using the bars go back variable in the card counting, so we can leave that. We don't have a show stat variable, so we can remove this. And in terms of the custom dev, that really does not need to be here anymore, so we can remove that as well. And that then means we will most likely need to remove the positive and negative integers to not have extra code that we just don't need. Okay, so a quick recap of what we have done so far here. We've translated the study into an upper study. We've changed the date to anchor to the first. We've removed some of the extra variables we didn't need. We still have all of the same VScore logic here. We changed the VScore from a plot variable to a def variable. And we've also changed all of the standard deviation variables here, where there's actually some formula behind it instead of just a static number. You can also get rid of these two semicolons. Now we've left the 0 and 1 and all of this code as is, which helps us define where is price action in relation to all of these standard deviations. So this is just kept as is from the previous tutorial. And then our bullish signal right now is just looking if we're below that 0.3 standard deviation, and our V-score on the previous bar was above 0 as well. And our CCI here is greater than -100, which isn't really a stringent condition, but that's what we have as of right now. Now we can go ahead and add in the logic first to make these colors line up. So that's some formatting, and then the card counting logic that I think we're all looking forward to. So if we come in here for all of these variables, we can say something like 0.set default color, and here we had color.white, I believe. Then for our one standard deviation line, that's a little bit thinner with a light gray, so we can say something like 1.set default color. We'll say color.light gray, and then we can do the same thing for -1, which would be set default color, color.light gray. Probably should have capitalized both here. Okay, now we move on to our two standard deviation line, which on our green side is a slight light green color, so we can say there 2.set default color, color.light green. And then on the -2 side, that is set default color, color.light red. And then finally, we have our three standard deviation line, which here is set default color, and that's just a strong, thick green line, so we can say color.green. And then here we can say -3.set default color, and this is going to be color.red. So now if we click apply, okay, that's somewhat doing a better job of matching. I know the colors still aren't a perfect match, but the overall idea is getting this scale that we would like to see. I think we can also make the VWAP line a little thicker and stand out. So we can say something like 0.set line weight, and then here we can say something like 3. Let's try that out first. Click apply. We see that got a little thicker, and I think that's good enough for what we're looking to do here. Now the last piece that we have left is to really tweak these signals here to try and include the counter logic, which would allow us to keep track of the V-score and how often we've been above 0 versus below 0, and really assigning a value to that of +1 to -1 all the way to 0 based on the actual value of the V-score. So let's start by defining the counter variable. We can say something like def counter is equal to if V-score is greater than or equal to 0, then we'd like to essentially have a value of, say, 1, for example. Then we can say else if our V-score value is below 0, so that means we're really in this 0 to -3 territory, then there we're going to assign a value of -1, else we'll say 0. So that's the counter variable. This in itself is not really counting anything. It's just really more of a Boolean variable letting us know what has the condition been true. We're going to use the sum formula here in conjunction with our bars go back to get an idea of what this counter has been, at least for the past X bars. So there we can say something like def trend, and we'll say sum counter variables, and this is going to be over bars go back. Now we can also define our bullish and bearish trend here, where we can say something like if our bull trend is something like if trend is greater than 0, then we know that for the most part here over say the past 30 bars, for example, if we change this to 30, so the past 30 days for using the V-score has for the most part had a positive value, which would be associated with a positive or rather bullish trend. And we can actually change this to positive trend. I think that's a better example or a better nomenclature for this particular variable. So we'll say if trend is greater than 0, then 1, else 0. And then here we can also break this out and we can say something like negative trend. That's going to be if trend is less than 0, then 1, else 0. And we can allow for that equals to scenario in case that is the case to be on the bullish side in terms of positive trend. So as of right now, we have trend defined. We have a counter variable which is keeping track of this. That's using the sum of really what has this counter been for the past, say in this case, 30 bars. So +1, -1, 0, 1, the sum of all of that over the past 30 bars, and then you use that to determine positive or negative trend. Now we can add that variable inside of our bull signal here, so we can say something like if positive trend for our bullish signal and our V-score conditions are true from before, and then here we can say something like negative trend and the V-score conditions are true. And so now let's go ahead and click apply and see what happens here so far. We should not see any arrows really plotting, at least on United States Steel. And the next thing we need to do is actually change the variable format here. So instead of plotting this as -2, this is now going to turn into a Boolean arrow. So we need this to be 1 if true or 0 if false. And then we need the same thing on our bear signal as well. And our painting strategy is going to be a Boolean arrow type. And that's just another type of arrow which will plot when, say, in this case, our plot condition has either a true or false value associated with it. Now, if I click apply here, now you should notice that arrow starts to plot the way we expect. And if I zoom out, what we have as of right now is something that's keeping track of the past 30 days of V-score value, really to understand if that's been above or below 0, using that to assess trend, and using that to then determine a pullback zone in which you're getting close to the VWAP line below our 0.3 number, I believe it was. And that's just a hard-coded arbitrary number here. You'll see that V-score is less than 0.3. You can change that to whatever you'd like if you would like to as well. Same thing with the CCI if you'd like to experiment with different things. But this should give you an idea of how very easily here, just using different logic to determine trend, we were able to create an upper study with a whole new set of bullish and bearish signals. Now, the last step here for this indicator file is to also update the alerts for anyone who does want that. And so this is our bullish alert here. So we can also add in, say, positive trend, and all of these conditions need to be true. And then here we can say something like negative trend, and all of these conditions need to be true. Okay, and so just like that now, we can click apply, click OK, click OK. The study now plots the way we expect it to. Now we can move on to building our scan for the study, which is a very easy one-liner. So to do that, just make sure you have the name of your study along with whatever name you may have given your signals right down here. And those are the two pieces of information that you will need in order to build the scan. So let me now back out of this, and let's come into the scan tab here. I'm going to close this out, and we can start with a brand new filter. So click add filter. You will need to be in the real money for this, not paper money, in order to add a custom study scan filter. Now in the drop down, we'll click custom and switch over to the ThinkScript editor tab. And here, all we need to do is say something like plot signal is equal to the name of the study, close this out with the parentheses, which means we're calling this script right here. And inside of this script, we're looking to try and find all the instances where bull signal is true. Now, once we click OK here, ThinkOrSwim will give us a prompt, that tells us that, hey, this is now linked to the study. And one thing to keep in mind is this is also going to be linked to the anchor date inside of the study. So as of right now, we have the anchor date at January 1st, 2021. You'll need to be wary of the fact that inside of the scan filter, using something like a daily time frame scan, this I believe has really only the data feed to go back 1 year. So if you try to say set your anchor filter in the VScore study, the upper study, to something like say January 1st, but this time 2021 or 2020, excuse me, then the scan would really not have access to that date period. That's beyond the 1 year time frame, and it would only go back really to the extent that it can go back. So I think anchoring here to the beginning of the year is the best way to try and find criteria that is actually meeting a scan along with an anchor date that has some sort of relevance and allows you to automate much of that process. Now clicking OK here, the prompt comes up that this is now linked to the custom study. If you make any changes to the link scripts, that will not be reflected in this filter. So you would need to come in and rerun the same scan, replot the same code, or update the date. If you come into this edit icon, you'll see the date is now available here inside of the same script that we just called. So now if I click scan, we have 31 symbols inside of our weeklies, which are currently meeting this entire goal that we have. So we already tested United States Steel. Let's go ahead and also test, say, JP Morgan. So let's come into JPM. And here, using our V-score, using the upper V-score study, let's zoom in to really just the time period we care about. Let me create a new study set here, or a painting set, excuse me, so we don't have any of the Fibonacci lines. Now here, what you should notice, the V-score really started off January 1st, 2001. That's the date the VWAP is anchored to. For the most part, price action here has been above our VWAP line. We're now getting a pullback to the same VWAP period. V-score for the most part, majority of the time has been above 1. And that's where this bullish signal is plotting, really looking for a move away in the bullish direction, closer to our 1 standard deviation as the nearest territory, which is plotting at 159.78. You can see maybe how that makes this a little bit easier. The other thing to call out here, we also have the bullish signal plotting using our lower time frame studies. So here, a confluence between two different signals. That should give you an idea of how that one very simple scan line here, which we plotted right down here below, that was this one line, then inserted all of this code automatically for us. ThinkOrSwim took care of that. And we had a list of exact candidates here where we currently see our new bullish signal plotting. All right, I hope this video was helpful. Both the scans along with the new upper study are also available on that same VScore indicator page, and they're available as part of the new revised downloads where you'll see there's two different folders, an upper and a lower time frame study. All right, take care everyone. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and we'll see you in the next update.